At the prestigious New York Marathon, a poor black young man with shoes held together by duct tape is racing against death to win the prize money and save his father from total paralysis. He pushed himself to his very last bit of strength to reach for victory. But right before the finish line, the son of the billionaire, who once humiliated him, suddenly collapsed in pain from a serious injury. Choosing to lose all the prize money, he turned back to carry his rival across the finish line without hesitation. He couldn't imagine that this stupid act would accidentally awaken a secret buried for 20 years. Let us know where you're watching from, a city, a small town, or somewhere in between. And subscribe because tomorrow's story is truly special. The wind on the Verrazano Narrows Bridge did not just blow, it bit. It sliced through layers of cotton and sank its teeth into the bone. Standing in the shadow of the suspension cables, Marcus shivered. He was not shivering from nerves, but from the cold. While 50,000 other runners bounced on their toes in thermal compression suits and foil blankets, Marcus stood still in a stained white t-shirt and gym shorts that had seen better days years ago. He looked down at his feet. They were the punchline to a joke nobody else heard. Gray, battered racing flats held together by layers of silver duct tape around the toe box. They were grotesque compared to the sea of neon orange, electric blue, and carbon-plated perfection surrounding him. He was invisible here, less a runner than a smudge at the edge of someone else's dream. No coach whispered splits in his ear. No family members held cardboard signs. There was just the biting wind, the smell of deep-heating muscle cream from the guy next to him, and the weight of a laminated photograph burning a hole in his pocket. Then the crowd parted. A group in matching pristine tracksuits carved a path through the throng. In the center was Bryce. You did not need to know his name to know who he was. He had the jawline of a movie star and the arrogant posture of a billionaire's son who had never been told no in his life. His support team, 5 people deep, fussed over him, adjusting his sunglasses and tying his shoelaces so he would not have to bend down. Bryce stopped mid-stretch, his eyes hidden behind $300 lenses locked onto Marcus's shoes. A smirk curled on his lips. It was not a friendly smile. It was the look a wolf gives a wounded deer. Bryce did not speak to Marcus. He did not even acknowledge Marcus as a human being. He simply turned his head and snapped his fingers at a nearby security officer. "Hey, officer, over here." Bryce's voice was loud, practice designed to draw attention. "Check this one. He does not belong." The chatter in the immediate vicinity died instantly. Heads turned. 100 pairs of eyes shifted from Bryce's shining gear to Marcus's taped-up shoes. Marcus stiffened, his hands balled into fists at his sides, fingernails digging into his palms. "Do not react," he told himself. "Just breathe." A heavy-set security guard pushed through the crowd, looking annoyed. "What is the issue?" "I think he hopped the fence," Bryce said, crossing his arms and leaning back comfortably. "Look at him. Does that look like a marathon runner to you? This is a secured area for athletes, not a homeless shelter." The guard looked Marcus up and down. He saw the fraying shorts, the lack of a warm-up jacket, the duct tape. "ID and bib number," the guard barked, stepping into Marcus's personal space. "I am registered," Marcus said, his voice raspy from the cold. "My bib is under my shirt." "Show me, and empty your pockets." "I have to warm up. The gun is about to—" "Empty the pockets, now!" The humiliation hit Marcus like a physical slap. He felt the heat rising in his neck, warring with the freezing wind. Slowly, with trembling hands, he reached into his shorts. He pulled out his inventory, laying each item into the guard's gloved hand like he was surrendering contraband. First, a granola bar, the generic kind, crumbled in its wrapper. Next, a plastic water bottle reused so many times the label was peeling off. Then a phone with a screen shattered into a spiderweb of cracks. Finally, the photograph. It was small, laminated in cheap plastic. A picture of a black man in a wheelchair holding a younger Marcus. The man in the photo was smiling a smile that reached his eyes, so different from the stony expression on Marcus's face right now. Bryce leaned in, inspecting the pile of poverty in the guard's hand. He let out a short, sharp laugh that echoed in the silence. "See," Bryce announced to the crowd playing to his audience. "This is New York City, folks. Cannot even run a race without someone begging for change." He turned to his team, his voice dripping with mock pity. "Maybe we should let him shine my shoes. He might make a few bucks before the sweep bus picks him up." Laughter rippled through Bryce's entourage. It was a cruel, jagged sound. Marcus stared straight ahead, fixing his eyes on the horizon, refusing to let a single tear fall. He would not give them that satisfaction. The guard spent 10 agonizing minutes calling it in. He scrutinized the ID. He radioed headquarters. He looked at Marcus like he was a stain on the pavement. "Is he clear?" Someone from the crowd yelled impatiently. The radio crackled. "He is clear. Marcus Reed, wave 4. The guard looked almost disappointed. He shoved the items back into Marcus's chest. "You are holding up the start," the guard grumbled as if it were Marcus's fault. He pointed a thick finger toward the very rear of the massive assembly miles away from the elite line where Bryce stood. "Get to the back of your assigned corral. Wave 4. Now." "But my qualifying time put me in an earlier corral." Marcus started his voice tight. "Back." Bryce chuckled already, jogging in place, his expensive shoes bouncing lightly on the asphalt. "Better hurry, kid. Do not trip over your own laces." Marcus slowly bent down. He picked up the granola bar. He picked up the phone. Then he picked up the photo. He wiped a speck of dust off his father's face with his thumb, a gesture so tender it made a woman nearby look away in shame. He tucked the photo deep into his pocket, pressing it against his heart. "I am still running, Dad," he whispered into the wind. Boom! The cannon blast shook the bridge. The race had started. Far ahead, the elite runners surged forward like a wave of color and power. Bryce disappeared into the mass of privileged bodies chasing glory. Marcus stood frozen for a second, surrounded by the slow movers. He was miles behind the leaders. He was already losing. Then he moved. He dropped his chin, found the mat like a lighthouse through bodies, and cut forward one clean line through the mess. His taped shoes hit the pavement. With every stride, the noise of the crowd began to fade, replaced by the rhythm of his own breathing. That rhythm was a time machine dragging him away from the bridge, pulling him back to the moment the silence first began. That silence started 4 years ago in a house that used to be loud. Before the silence, the Reed household was filled with the clanking of dishes, the roar of televised track meets, and the heavy breathing of a man doing push-ups in the living room. James Marcus's father had been a machine. A single father who worked 3 jobs to keep the lights on and still trained like an Olympian. He was built from iron and willpower. But iron bends and willpower breaks when a delivery truck runs a red light at 40 miles per hour. The police report called it an accident. The doctors called it a T12 spinal injury. The neighbors just called it a tragedy. James came home in a second-hand wheelchair with a squeaky left wheel. The man who had once run a marathon in 2 hours and 19 minutes, who was inches away from the national team, did not just lose his legs. He lost his gravity. He took the medals off the wall and threw them into a cardboard box, taping it shut with a violence that shook the thin walls of their trailer. He stopped opening the curtains. He sat in the dark day after day, staring at a television that was not turned on. Marcus, 15 years old and terrified, watched his Superman crumble. There was no money for therapy, no money for specialized care. So the boy became the man. Marcus dropped out of high school quietly. He did not tell his friends. He just stopped showing up. He took his father's shifts, dishwashing until 3 in the morning, delivery at dawn, cleaning Ray's old gym in the afternoon. He slept in 20-minute bursts. He ate food that customers sent back. And because they could not afford the bus fare to the delivery route Marcus ran, it did not start as a passion. It started as survival. Those first few months were hell. Running in jeans and flat sneakers, lungs burning, dodging stray dogs and broken glass in the pre-dawn darkness of Newark. He ran because if he was late, they did not eat. He ran because the rent was due and the landlord did not care about sob stories. But slowly, the pain changed. One morning, as the sun bled over the gritty skyline, Marcus realized something. The rhythm of his feet hitting the pavement was the only time the noise in his head stopped. For those 4 miles, he was not the poor kid with the crippled dad. He was just motion. He was free. Then came the day he found the shoes. He was sweeping under his father's bed, chasing dust bunnies when his broom hit a shoebox. He pulled it out. Inside were racing flats, vintage, worn, but structured. Inside the tongue, written in black marker, was a history lesson, New York 2005, 2 hours, 19 minutes. Not fast enough. Next year will be faster. There never was a next year for James. Marcus put them on. They were a size too big, swallowing his feet. He stuffed the toes with old newspaper and laced them tight. When he stood up, he felt a strange electricity shoot up his legs. It was not just rubber and foam. It was a legacy. He began to train in secret. He did not want to hurt his dad. He knew the sight of running shoes made James turn his face to the wall. Ray Mitchell, the owner of the gym where Marcus cleaned, was a man carved out of granite and cynicism. He was 62, with knees that clicked when he walked, and a heart he kept hidden behind a scowl. One late night, Ray heard the treadmill humming in the back. He walked over, ready to yell about the electric bill. Then he stopped. He saw the boy. Marcus was a blur. His form was raw arms, swinging too wide, head bobbing, but the engine was terrifying. Ray looked at the console. The pace was suicidal, and Marcus had been holding it for 40 minutes. Ray did not yell. He waited until Marcus stepped off, gasping for air. "You are wasting energy with those arms," Ray grunted. "Tuck your elbows." That was how it started. No contracts, no payment, just an old man seeing a ghost of his own youth in a boy who refused to quit. Ray wrote workouts on napkins. He timed splits with an ancient stopwatch. He saw what the world did, not a diamond covered in mud. But you cannot hide running in a trailer park forever. One evening, James saw the shoes by the door. He picked one up, feeling the fresh wear on the sole. When Marcus walked in, the air in the room was thick enough to choke on. "You are running," James said. His voice was dead flat. "Dad, I forbid it." The sudden volume made Marcus jump. James spun his chair around, eyes blazing with a fury Marcus had never seen. He grabbed the box of medals from the corner and hurled it across the room. It crashed, spilling gold and silver ribbons across the dirty linoleum. "Look at that!" James screamed, pointing at his useless legs. "That is what running gets you. It takes your legs. It takes your life. It takes everything you love." It was a car. Dad, not the running. "It is the hope," James roared, tears finally spilling over. "It makes you believe you are special, and then it breaks you. I will not let it break my son." Marcus stood his ground, trembling. He looked at the broken man who used to be his hero. "You lost your legs, Dad," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking, "but I still have mine. Why do you hate that I can use them?" James stared at him. The anger drained away, leaving only a hollow, terrible sadness. He did not answer. He just rolled into his bedroom and slammed the door. Marcus did not stop. He could not. He kept working. He kept running in the dark. And Ray kept clicking his stopwatch, watching the times drop lower and lower until he realized the boy was not just fast. He was faster than his father. The fragile piece of their lives did not just crack. It shattered. It happened on a Tuesday night. Marcus walked in carrying a box of leftover pasta, smelling of dishwater and fatigue. The house was dark. Too dark. "Dad," silence. Marcus turned on the light and dropped the food. The red sauce splattered across the floor like blood. James was lying face down on the carpet. His wheelchair was tipped on its side, one wheel spinning lazily in the stagnant air. "Dad!" Marcus screamed, sliding across the floor. He rolled his father over. James was breathing, but barely. His skin was clammy gray as ash. The ambulance ride was a blur of siren wails and flashing red lights that cut through the darkness of Newark. Marcus held his father's hand the whole way. It felt terrifyingly light. The hospital was a place of cold surfaces and colder truths. The doctor who came out of the emergency room looked tired. He held a clipboard like a shield. "It is spinal compression," the doctor said, his tone clinical, detached. "The injury from the accident has degraded. It is pressing on the nerves, controlling his upper body now. If we do not operate immediately, the paralysis will ascend. He will lose the use of his arms, then his respiratory muscles. He will not be able to breathe on his own." Marcus felt the room spin. "So operate. Fix him." The doctor hesitated. He looked at Marcus's worn clothes. "It's complex neurosurgery. Your insurance barely covers the bed he's in. And on paper, the policy doesn't call it emergency until his breathing starts failing." "Not an emergency," Marcus's voice cracked. "So you wait until he can't breathe, then you call it urgent. I do not make the rules, son. The upfront cost is $80,000. $80,000. The number hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Marcus checked his bank account on his cracked phone. $312. That was his life savings. "How long?" Marcus asked. 3 months? Maybe 4. After that, the damage is permanent. Marcus sat in the plastic chair in the hallway, head in his hands. $80,000. He made $11 an hour washing dishes. He could work for 10 years and not save that much. Ray found him there at 2 in the morning. The old gym owner sat down, his joints popping. He did not offer a hug. He did not offer pity. He offered a number. "The New York City Marathon is in 4 weeks. Ray said quietly. Marcus looked up, eyes bloodshot. Are you crazy, Ray? My dad is dying, and you want to talk about a race? First place is 6 figures. Ray continued, ignoring the outburst. You won't touch first. Those guys have teams. But top 3 pays real money. Top 5 puts you on cameras. And cameras turn into stipends, sponsors a contract. We stack it every dollar we can. It still wouldn't reach 80. Not by itself. But it was hope something with edges. It was the only weapon they had left. I cannot beat them, Ray. They have altitude training. They have teams. I have this. Marcus gestured to his ragged body. Ray looked him in the eye. You have something they do not. You are running for a life. They are just running for a trophy. The next morning, Ray did something he swore he would never do. He walked into a pawn shop downtown. He was carrying a flat-screen television, his prized possession, the only thing he watched his old boxing tapes on. How much, Ray asked the clerk. $50. Screen is scratched. It is worth $200. $50. Take it or leave it. Ray took the $50. He added it to a wad of crumpled bills from his mattress stash. It was the entry fee. The training that followed was not training. It was torture. Marcus stopped sleeping almost entirely. He ran at 3:30 in the morning before the delivery route. He ran in the stairwell of the restaurant during his breaks. He ran at midnight in the gym with Ray screaming at him until he vomited into a trash can. Faster! Ray would yell, slamming his hand on the treadmill. That pace does not save your father faster. Marcus's feet blistered. The blisters popped and bled. He wrapped them in gauze, put on 2 pairs of socks, and kept running. He ran until his vision blurred. He ran until he tasted copper in his throat. In the hospital room, the lies started. I got a promotion, Dad, Marcus said, forcing a bright smile as he wiped his father's forehead. More hours. Manager says I am doing great. We will have the money soon. James looked at his son. He saw the hollowed-out cheeks. He saw the way Marcus flinched when he put weight on his left foot. He knew it was a lie, but he was too weak to ask, too scared of the answer. The night before the race, the wind howled outside the mobile home, shaking the windows. Marcus sat on the floor. His dad was alone in the hospital. The house felt empty, like a tomb. He pulled the old shoes out of his gym bag. They were falling apart. The sole was peeling near the heel. He took a roll of silver duct tape and began to wrap them, round and round, binding the shoe together, binding his life together. He pulled back the tongue of the shoe. He looked at the faded ink of his father's handwriting. Next year will be faster. Marcus uncapped a black marker. His hand did not shake. Underneath his father's broken promise, he wrote 3 words in thick black strokes. Next year is now. He set the shoes by the door. There was no turning back. Tomorrow, he would not just be running a race. He would be outrunning death itself. The memory dissolved like morning fog. Marcus blinked, and he was back on the bridge. The cold wind slapped his face. The noise of the crowd rushed into his ears. His father's photograph pressed warm against his chest, tucked safe inside his pocket. The starting cannon had already fired. The elite runners were gone, swallowed by the first mile somewhere far ahead. Around Marcus, the final wave shuffled forward, weekend joggers in cotton t-shirts, charity walkers holding signs, tourists who would stop at every mile marker for selfies. Marcus was not here for selfies. He lowered his head, fixed his eyes on the distant timing mat, and launched himself forward. His taped shoes hit the pavement with a sound like a heartbeat. 1 stride, 2, 3. The slow movers parted around him as he cut through the crowd, weaving between bodies, chasing ghosts. His foot crossed the timing mat. The chip beeped. The course clock had been running since wave 1, but his race began now. The first mile disappeared beneath his feet, then the second, then the third. Marcus found his rhythm, that familiar drumbeat of breath and footfall that silenced everything else. The ache in his legs faded. The noise of the spectators became white noise. There was only the road, the cold air burning his lungs, and the clock ticking somewhere ahead. By the 5th mile, he had passed the charity walkers. By the 7th, he had left the joggers behind. The runners around him now wore compression gear and GPS watches, their faces tight with focus. They glanced at his duct-taped shoes and frayed shorts, then looked away like he was something embarrassing. Marcus did not care. He was not here for their respect. His splits were fast, faster than they should have been for someone who started in the last wave minutes behind the field. Every mile marker he passed, he did the math in his head. The gap was shrinking. The leaders were not as far ahead as they thought. At the 10th kilometer, the course turned onto First Avenue in Manhattan. The crowds here were thick, screaming behind metal barriers, holding signs and ringing cowbells. Marcus barely heard them. His eyes were locked on the road ahead, searching for the lead pack. By the 15th kilometer, he found them. A cluster of elite runners moved together near the front, their strides synchronized like a school of fish. Sponsored athletes with six-figure contracts and teams of coaches analyzing their every breath. And right in the center of the pack, that pristine white tracksuit, Bryce Whitfield running easy, his face relaxed, his expensive shoes barely touching the ground. Marcus pushed harder. The gap shrank. 200 meters, 100, 50. He pulled up behind the pack, close enough to hear their breathing, close enough to smell the menthol sports cream on their legs. Bryce turned his head. Their eyes met. For 1 second, Bryce's face went completely blank, like he was seeing a ghost. Then recognition flooded in, followed by something darker. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. He snapped something to the two runners flanking him, both men wearing the same sponsored gear, both moving with the mechanical precision of paid pacers. The formation changed instantly. 3 bodies spread across the width of the road shoulder to shoulder, creating a wall of flesh and expensive fabric. There was no gap on the left, no gap on the right. Marcus was boxed in, trapped behind a human barricade, moving at exactly the pace Bryce wanted. He tried to pass on the outside. The walls shifted, sealing the gap before he could squeeze through. He tried the inside. Same result. Every move he made, they countered. It was not technically against the rules. Runners were allowed to hold their line, allowed to run in groups, allowed to position themselves however they wanted. But everyone watching knew exactly what was happening. Marcus settled in behind them, conserving energy, waiting for an opening that never came. The kilometers ticked by. 16th, 17th. The crowd noise rose and fell like waves as they passed through different neighborhoods, but Marcus barely heard it. His entire focus was on the 3 backs in front of him, looking for any crack, any hesitation, any chance to break through. The 17th kilometer brought the first water station. Tables lined both sides of the road, volunteers holding out paper cups of water and sports drink. Runners grabbed them without breaking stride, drinking on the move, tossing empty cups into the gutter. Marcus desperately needed water. His throat was raw from the cold air, his lips cracked and bleeding. He had not had anything to drink since the granola bar that morning, the one the security guard had dumped on the ground. He surged toward the water table, arm outstretched. A shoulder slammed into his bicep. Hard. Not an accident. Not a jostle in a crowded space. A deliberate hit. The cup flew from his fingers before he could grab it. Water splashed across the pavement and vanished. Marcus stumbled, his rhythm broke in his feet, stuttering on the wet asphalt. By the time he regained his balance, one of Bryce's teammates had already pulled ahead. The man never looked back, never acknowledged what he had done, just kept running eyes forward like nothing had happened. Marcus swallowed his rage. There was no time to stop, no time to complain, no time to grab another cup. The pack was already pulling away, and every second he wasted was another second lost. He ran on. No water, no rhythm, just anger burning in his chest. At the 22nd kilometer, the wall reformed. This time they ran even tighter, 3 shoulders nearly touching, blocking the entire racing line. Marcus tried to break wide, swinging far to the outside to pass. It added extra meters to his distance, extra energy he could not afford to spend. He passed one runner, another slid into the gap. He passed another. The wall reformed. They were rotating, taking turns at the front, sharing the workload while Marcus burned himself out trying to get around them. By the 28th kilometer, his body was failing. The dehydration hit him like a hammer. His muscles cramped, his vision blurred at the edges. His legs, which had felt so strong in the first half of the race, now felt like they were filled with sand. Every stride was a negotiation with pain. He had dropped to 15th place. 15 runners between him and the prize money. 15 bodies between him and his father's surgery. The math was brutal, and it was getting worse by the minute. Ray's voice echoed in his memory, gravelly and sharp. As long as your feet are hitting the ground, you are still in the race. Marcus thought about the hospital room, the machines beeping, his father's face on that pillow, gray and tired, the doctor's voice saying words like permanent and ascending paralysis and $80,000. He thought about the photo in his pocket, his father smiling in a wheelchair, a man who had once run faster than almost anyone in the country. His feet were still hitting the ground. He was still in the race. Marcus gritted his teeth and pushed. The 32nd kilometer fed into the long pull-up Fifth Avenue, the kind of climb that doesn't look like much until it starts stealing your breath. The lead pack slowed as the incline bit into their legs. Their perfect formation finally cracked as fatigue overrode strategy. Marcus did not slow down. He attacked the hill like a man on fire, like gravity was a suggestion he had decided to ignore. His lungs screamed, his calves burned, but the gap was shrinking, and that was all that mattered. 15th became 12th, 12th became 10th, 10th became 8th. Runners he passed shot him. Looks of disbelief. The kid in the taped shoes, the charity case they had all dismissed, was hunting them down one by one. Near the top of the hill, the course passed another water station. The crowds here were thick, pressing against the barriers, screaming encouragement at the runners struggling up the incline. One face stood out from the rest. Ray Mitchell stood pressed against the metal barrier, his knuckles white from gripping it. His face was purple from shouting. His voice was hoarse, nearly gone, but he was still screaming Marcus's name over and over. Marcus Water, grab the water, do not look at anyone else, just drink. Marcus veered toward the table. A volunteer held out a cup. He snatched it from her hand, poured it down his throat in one desperate gulp, and hurled the empty cup to the ground. He never broke stride. Ray's voice chased him up the hill, cracking with emotion. "You are faster than your father. You hear me faster than James ever was." The words hit Marcus like electricity. Something surged through his exhausted body. Something beyond adrenaline, beyond training, beyond anything physical. He tucked his chin and ran harder. The course leveled out after the hill. The finish line was less than 10 kilometers away now. Marcus was in 6th place, and the gap to 5th was shrinking with every stride. By the 37th kilometer, he had broken into 4th. The lead pack had splintered completely. 2 Kenyan runners held 1st and 2nd, their strides still smooth and mechanical, their bodies built for exactly this kind of punishment. In 3rd place, Bryce Whitfield was coming apart. His perfect form had collapsed. His arms swung wild and sloppy, wasting energy with every stride. His head bobbed up and down instead of staying level. His breathing came in ragged, desperate gasps that Marcus could hear from 20 meters back. Marcus pulled closer. 15 meters. 10. 5. He drew alongside Bryce. Their shoulders nearly touched. The crowd along the barriers exploded with noise, sensing something dramatic about to happen. Bryce turned his head. His face was gray with exhaustion, his eyes bloodshot, his lips cracked and bleeding. When he saw Marcus running beside him, his expression shifted from pain to disbelief. "No way," Bryce gasped between ragged breaths. "No goddamn way. You were back of the pack. I saw you." Marcus said nothing. He kept his eyes on the road ahead. 3rd place was right there, close enough to taste. $50,000. His father's surgery. Everything he had sacrificed for the last 4 weeks. He pushed past Bryce. 3rd place, 2 runners ahead. 5 kilometers to the finish line. The crowd noise swelled around him. Strangers screamed his bib number, screamed encouragement, screamed because they could feel something special happening. Marcus barely heard them. His entire world had narrowed to the road beneath his feet and the 2 figures ahead of him. Then behind him, something went wrong. A wet, ugly sound, like a branch snapping. Like something that should never breaking. And then a scream. It cut through the crowd noise like a knife through cloth. A high, raw, animal sound of pure agony that made spectators gasp and turn their heads. Marcus knew that voice. He looked back over his shoulder. Bryce was on the ground. His right leg was bent at an angle that legs were not supposed to bend. The knee twisted wrong. The whole limb crumpled beneath him like wet paper. He was clutching his leg with both hands, his face white with shock, his screams dissolving into breathless whimpers. Runners streamed around him. 1 passed. 2. 5. 10. Their eyes flickered to the fallen body, and then away, their legs carrying them forward, their minds already justifying why they could not stop. The race was almost over. The medical team would come. Someone else would help. Nobody stopped. Marcus was still running. 3rd place, 5 kilometers left. $50,000 and his father's life waiting at the finish line. His feet kept moving for 3 more strides. 4. 5. Then they stopped. Marcus stood in the middle of the road while the race flowed around him. Runners passed on his left, on his right. Their footsteps pounded the pavement like a drumbeat, steady and relentless. None of them looked back. None of them slowed down. Behind him, Bryce Whitfield lay curled on the asphalt, both hands wrapped around his destroyed knee, his screams fading into wet, gasping sobs. The clock was still running. Every second Marcus stood still, his position dropped. Fourth place became fifth. Fifth became sixth. Sixth became something that did not matter anymore because the podium was where the money was, and he was watching it slip away with every heartbeat. 3 kilometers to the finish line. $50,000. His father in a hospital bed waiting for a surgery that would never come. Marcus turned around. He walked back to where Bryce lay crumpled on the ground. The younger man looked up at him with eyes that could not comprehend what they were seeing. Tears streamed down his face, cutting tracks through the salt and sweat and grime. His whole body shook with shock and pain. "What are you doing?" Bryce's voice came out high and broken. "Why did you stop? Keep running. Go! Go!" Marcus knelt beside him. Up close, the injury was worse than it looked from a distance. Bryce's right knee had twisted inward, the joint clearly dislocated, maybe worse. The leg lay at an angle that made Marcus's stomach turn. "The medics will come," Bryce gasped. "Just leave me. You have to finish. You are in third place. You can still make top 5 if you go now." Marcus grabbed Bryce's arm and pulled it over his shoulder. "What are you doing? Stop, I do not deserve. After everything I did to you today." Bryce's words dissolved into a cry of pain as Marcus hauled him upright. "Can you put any weight on it?" "No. God, no. It hurts. Everything hurts." "Then hop. Use me for balance." "Why are you doing this?" Bryce's voice cracked. "I tried to destroy you out there. I told my pacers to box you in. I told Garrett to knock the water out of your hand at the station. I paid them to sabotage you. I called you a beggar this morning. I tried to get security to throw you out of the race." He was sobbing now, ugly and raw. "I am a piece of garbage." "Why are you helping me?" Marcus did not answer. He adjusted his grip on Bryce's arm and took the first step forward. It was agony. Bryce's weight pressed down on Marcus's shoulder, nearly 200 pounds of dead mass that his exhausted legs had to carry, in addition to his own body. Every step sent fresh pain shooting through his calves and thighs, muscles that had already run 39 kilometers and had nothing left to give. They moved forward at a walking pace, barely faster than a crawl. Runners streamed past them in a blur of color and motion, their faces flickering with confusion as they registered what they were seeing. Some looked away, quickly embarrassed. Others stared with open mouths. 7th place passed, then 8th, then 10th. The crowds along the barriers began to notice. The noise changed, shifting from generic cheering to something sharper, more focused. Phones came out by the hundreds. People pointed and shouted to their neighbors. A murmur rippled down the course, spreading faster than Marcus could walk. "You are insane," Bryce said through clenched teeth. "You know that, right? You are completely insane. You are throwing away everything. The money, the scholarship, the national team, everything you worked for. Shut up and keep hopping." "I need to understand." Bryce's voice was desperate now, pleading. Nobody has ever." "Why? Just tell me why." Marcus kept his eyes on the road ahead. The finish line banner was visible in the distance, a bright rectangle of color against the gray November sky. It looked impossibly far away. "My father taught me something," Marcus said, his breath coming hard from the effort of carrying Bryce's weight. "He said the race shows you who you really are, not when you are winning, but when you could win and you choose not to." Bryce went quiet. His body shook against Marcus's shoulder, and it took Marcus a moment to realize that Bryce was crying again, not from physical pain this time, something else. "I do not deserve this," Bryce whispered. "I do not deserve someone like you." "Nobody deserves anything," Marcus said. "We just choose what we do." They kept walking. The finish line grew closer, meter by agonizing meter. 15th place passed them. 20th. 25th. The crowd noise built with every step. What had started as confused murmurs had become a roar. People pressed against the barriers, screaming encouragement, screaming Marcus's name, a name most of them had never heard before today. Cameras flashed from every direction. Television crews on motorcycles circled back to capture the footage. Marcus barely noticed. His world had shrunk to the next step, and the next and the next. His legs burned. His lungs burned. The photo in his pocket felt like it weighed 100 pounds. At the final stretch, the barriers narrowed and the crowds pressed in tight. The finish line was 100 meters away. 50,000 spectators packed the grandstands and spilled onto the sidewalks, their noise rising to a deafening crescendo. 30th place passed. 35th. 40th. "We are almost there," Marcus said. Bryce lifted his head. His face was a mess of tears and snot and exhaustion, but something had changed in his eyes, something that looked almost like wonder. "Marcus." It was the first time Bryce had used his name. "Cross first. Please. You deserve it more than me." Marcus stopped walking. They were 20 meters from the finish line, 20 meters from the end of everything. "No," Marcus said. "You go first." "What? That is insane. After everything I did, you go first." Marcus shifted Bryce's weight off his shoulder, steadying him so he could stand on his own for a moment. "I am not finishing ahead of an injured man I had to carry. That is not winning. That is just math." Bryce stared at him. His mouth moved, but no words came out. "Go," Marcus said, "before I change my mind." Bryce took one hopping step forward, then another, then another. His face contorted with each movement, but he kept going, kept pushing toward the white line painted across the road. He crossed it and collapsed into the arms of waiting medical staff. Marcus walked across the line 1 second later. The official clock showed a time that meant nothing. His final position was somewhere outside the top 50, a number that would be forgotten by tomorrow. No prize money, no scholarship offer, no invitation to join the national team. Nothing but a bib number and a finishing medal that everyone received just for completing the course. The crowd went silent. 50,000 people held their breath at the same moment, like the whole world had pressed pause. Marcus stood alone past the finish line, his legs shaking his body, empty his race over. Then the silence broke. The roar that erupted was unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. It came from everywhere at once, a wall of sound that hit him like a physical force. People screamed his name. People screamed words he could not understand. People stood on their seats and applauded until their hands were red. Marcus did not hear any of it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph. His father's face smiled up at him, frozen behind cheap plastic captured in a moment from years ago when everything was still possible. "I am sorry, Dad," Marcus whispered to the photo. "I could not bring the money home. I could not save you." He pressed the photo against his chest and closed his eyes. The crowd kept roaring. The cameras kept flashing. And Marcus Reed stood alone at the finish line of the New York City Marathon, victorious and defeated in the same breath. The hospital corridor smelled like disinfectant and despair. Marcus walked through the automatic doors, still wearing his race clothes. Dried sweat had stiffened the fabric into something like cardboard. His legs could barely hold him upright. Every step sent fresh pain shooting through muscles that had been pushed far past their breaking point. He had not showered, had not eaten, had not done anything except get in a cab and give the driver the address of Newark General Hospital. The elevator took forever. Marcus leaned against the wall, watching the floor numbers climb, feeling the weight of the photograph in his pocket, like an anchor dragging him down. 3rd floor, 4th floor, 5th floor. The doors opened. Marcus walked down the hallway toward room 512, his taped shoes leaving gray marks on the clean linoleum. He stopped outside his father's door. Through the small window, he could see James sitting up in bed. The television mounted on the wall was playing something, the blue light flickering across his father's face. Marcus could not see what was on the screen from this angle. He pushed the door open. James did not look at him. On the television, a replay of the marathon finish was playing. 2 figures, one holding up the other, limping across the finish line together. The camera zoomed in on Marcus's face, twisted with effort, his arm wrapped around Bryce's waist. A commentator's voice said something about an incredible display of sportsmanship and the story of this year's race. James picked up the remote and muted the television. The silence that followed was worse than any noise. "You lied to me." Marcus stood in the doorway, frozen. "Dad, I can explain. You said you were working extra shifts." James's voice was flat and cold, emptied of all emotion. "You said you were saving money for my surgery. You said the bills were going to be taken care of. I thought I could win. I thought the prize money. I told you not to run." James finally turned his head. His eyes were red-rimmed, bloodshot, burning with something that might have been anger or might have been grief. "I made myself absolutely clear. I forbade you, and you went behind my back." "I did it for you," Marcus's voice cracked. "I did everything for you. The training, the race, all of it. I thought if I could just finish in the top 5. You thought wrong." James's words hit like a slap, Look at that screen. Look at what you did. You were in third place Marcus, and you threw it away. You threw away $50,000 to carry some rich white boy across the finish line. He was hurt. His knee was destroyed. I could not just leave him there. Why not? James's voice rose. Everyone else did. That is how the world works. You think anyone would have stopped for you. You think any of those sponsors, any of those coaches, any of those privileged athletes with their fancy shoes and their fancy teams would have given you a second glance if you were the one bleeding on the pavement. Marcus had no answer. He stood in the doorway, his head bowed, his hands hanging at his sides. James stared at his son for a long moment. The anger in his face flickered, shifted, became something more complicated. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, almost afraid. Your qualifying time, in New Jersey. What was it? Marcus looked up, confused by the change in direction. What? The marathon you ran to qualify for New York. What was your finishing time? 2 hours and 17 minutes. James went completely still. The room was silent, except for the beeping of the heart monitor and the distant sound of nurses in the hallway. James stared at his son like he was seeing him for the first time. 2:17, James repeated slowly. You ran a marathon in 2 hours and 17 minutes. Yes, sir. James's hands trembled on the bedsheets. His eyes glistened with something that might have been tears. My best time, James said quietly. My absolute best when I was at my peak, training 6 hours a day with professional coaches and nutritionists and everything money could buy. My best time was 2:19. Marcus said nothing. He had known this, of course. Ray had told him at the finish line of the qualifier, had grabbed his shoulders and shook him and said, You just beat your father's record. You understand that you just beat James Reed. You are faster than me. James whispered, My God, you are actually faster than me. Dad, sit down. James pointed to the chair beside his bed. Sit down and let me tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago. Marcus walked to the chair and sat. His legs screamed with relief. Up close, he could see how much weight his father had lost in the hospital, how gray his skin had become, how the vitality that had once defined James Reed was draining away day by day. I told you I forbade you from running because of what happened to me, James said. The accident, the wheelchair, losing everything. That was true, but it was not the whole truth. He paused, gathering himself. When he continued, his voice was rough with old pain. Before the accident, I ran this same race, the New York City Marathon. I was having the best race of my life. I was in the lead pack, running faster than I had ever run before. I could see the finish line. I could see everything I had worked for my whole life about to come true. The national team, the sponsorships, the Olympics. It was all right there waiting for me. James stopped. He stared at the muted television, at the frozen image of Marcus carrying Bryce across the finish line. There was a man on the ground, around kilometer 40. He had collapsed. Heart problems, I found out later. The other runners went around him. The medical team was nowhere in sight. And I was going to pass him too. I was going to keep running just like everyone else. He turned to look at Marcus, but I stopped. I picked him up. I carried him to the nearest aid station. And by the time I got back on the course, I had lost my position. Lost my chance at the national team. Lost everything. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. A piece of a puzzle he had not known he was trying to solve clicked into place. The race shows you who you are, Marcus said softly. Not when you win, but when you could win and choose not to. I told you that when you were little. James's voice broke. I did not think you remembered. I remember everything you taught me, Dad. James reached out and took Marcus's hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were fierce. I forbade you from running because I was scared. I was scared you would end up just like me, doing the right thing and losing everything because of it, watching your whole life fall apart because you chose to be good instead of choosing to win. But you did the right thing, Marcus said, and look where it got me. James gestured at the hospital room, at the machines, at his useless legs beneath the thin blanket. I stopped to help a stranger, and my life went to hell. I lost my spot on the national team. I got depressed. I stopped training. I took 3 jobs to pay the bills because no sponsor wanted a runner who gave up his position to help someone else. And then I got hit by that truck and... He trailed off. The heart monitor beeped steadily in the silence. I watched you today, James said. On that television. I watched you do exactly what I did 20 years ago. The same race, the same choice. And I wanted to scream at you. I wanted to reach through that screen and shake you and tell you to keep running, to not make the same mistake I made." "It was not a mistake," Marcus said. "No." James's grip tightened on his son's hand. "No, it was not. I know that now. Watching you, seeing you make that choice without hesitation, without anyone telling you to, I realize something. I have spent 20 years being angry at myself for stopping. 20 years thinking I ruined my life by being decent, but I raised a son who did the same thing without even thinking about it, which means maybe I did something right after all." Marcus felt tears running down his face. He did not wipe them away. "I am not angry at you," James said. "I am proud of you. I am so proud of you I cannot even find the words." "But the surgery." "Forget the surgery." "I cannot forget it. You are going to die if we do not find $80,000 in the next 3 months. James squeezed his hand. "Then I will die knowing my son is a good man. That is more than most fathers get." "Dad, do not say that. It is the truth." James pulled Marcus closer, wrapping his thin arms around his son's shoulders. "You did the right thing today. Do not ever apologize for that. Do not ever regret it. The race shows you who you are, and today I saw exactly who you are. And I have never been more proud of anything in my entire life." They held each other in the dim hospital room, father and son, two men who had both sacrificed victory for the same reason, 20 years apart. When Marcus finally pulled back, he wiped his face with his sleeve and forced a smile. "I found a financial assistance program," he lied, "for the surgery. I submitted an application a few weeks ago. I think we are going to get approved." James looked at him. His eyes said he knew it was a lie, but he nodded slowly and did not ask any questions. "Get some rest," Marcus said. "I will come back tomorrow." Marcus: "Yeah, I love you." "I love you too, Dad." Marcus walked out of the room and down the hallway and through the automatic doors and into the cold night air. He found a bench outside the emergency entrance and sat down heavily, his body finally giving out. He checked his phone. The cracked screen showed his bank balance. $312, $80,000 for the surgery, 3 months to find it. And he had just thrown away $50,000 to carry a stranger across a finish line. The math was impossible. The situation was hopeless. His father was dying, and there was nothing Marcus could do about it. He sat on that bench until 2 in the morning, watching ambulances come and go, watching the breath fog in front of his face, trying to figure out how to perform a miracle. A shadow fell across him. Marcus looked up. Ray stood there, his old jacket zipped up against the cold, his hands shoved in his pockets. He did not say anything. He just sat down on the bench beside Marcus and stared out at the parking lot. They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Marcus spoke. "I did the right thing, Ray. I stopped to help him. Everyone says that was the right thing to do." "It was," Ray said. "Then why does it feel like I lost everything?" Ray did not answer for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was tired and old. "I do not know, kid. I wish I did, but I do not. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything, and there is no reward waiting at the end. Sometimes the right thing doesn't pay you back. Sometimes it just takes—" Marcus stared at his hands, the hands that had carried Bryce Whitfield across the finish line, the hands that had thrown away $50,000 and his father's life. "What do I do now?" he whispered. Ray put his hand on Marcus's shoulder, heavy, warm, the only comfort available in a cold and indifferent world. "I do not know," Ray said again, "but I am here. Whatever happens, I am here." They sat together on that bench outside the hospital, two men with no answers, waiting for a dawn that felt like it would never come. Across the river, in a world that might as well have been another planet, Bryce lay in his bed at the Whitfield estate, his right leg locked in a brace from hip to ankle. The surgery had taken 4 hours. The doctor said he would walk again, but never compete. His career as a marathon runner was over. He did not feel sad about that. He felt relieved. The television on the wall played the same footage on loop. Two men limping across the finish line. The kid in the taped shoes carrying the rich boy in the pristine tracksuit. Commentators called it the moment of the year. They did not know what Bryce had done to deserve being left on that road. The door opened. Edward Whitfield walked in his face, carved from stone, his eyes fixed on the screen. He watched the footage play through once, then he muted it. "The doctors say you will recover," Edward said flatly. "Physical therapy starts next week." "I do not want to recover." Bryce pushed himself up against the pillows. "I do not want to run anymore. I never wanted to run." "Do not be dramatic." "I am not being dramatic, Dad. I am telling you the truth for the first time in my life." Bryce's voice cracked. "That kid who carried me across the finish line. Marcus Reed. I tried to destroy him. I paid my pacers to box him in. I told Garrett to knock the water out of his hand. I cheated. I played dirty. And then my knee blew out, and the only person who stopped to help was the kid I had been sabotaging all day." Edward's face went pale. "You cheated." "Yes. You sabotaged another runner, in my name, wearing my sponsors. I did it because you told me I had to win," Bryce shouted. "You have been pushing me since I was 12. Every race, every time I wanted to quit, you said winners do not quit, Whitfields do not quit. You never once asked if I even liked running." Edward stood frozen. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. "I hate it, Dad." Bryce's voice dropped to a whisper. "I have always hated it. I only ran because I thought it was the only way to make you proud." The silence stretched between them. Edward turned away, walked to the window, and stared out at the manicured grounds. "I did not know," he said quietly. "I thought I was giving you something valuable, something that meant everything to me. Why? Why does running mean so much to you? You never even competed professionally." Edward was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice sounded different, older, tired. "The boy who helped you, what was his name?" "Marcus Reed." "And his father?" "James Reed." "Why?" Edward did not answer. He walked out of the room without another word. In his study, Edward locked the door and opened the bottom drawer of his desk. Beneath old documents there was a photograph. Faded, worn at the edges. He had not looked at it in years. Two men at a finish line. One was Edward, 20 years younger, exhausted and grateful. The other was a black man with a runner's build, holding Edward upright with an arm around his shoulders. James Reed. 20 years ago, Edward had collapsed during the New York City Marathon. Runners passed him by the dozens. He was certain he was going to die on that road. One man stopped. James Reed had been in the lead pack about to qualify for the national team. He gave it all up to carry a stranger to safety. Edward had tried to find him afterward, but James had lost his apartment, changed his phone number, disappeared into the margins of a city that did not care about poor men. Edward searched for years and never found him. Now James Reed's son had done exactly what his father did. Same race, same stretch of road, same impossible choice. Edward picked up his phone. "Find Marcus Reed, the runner from today's marathon. I need his address tonight." He walked back to Bryce's room. His son looked up confused by the return. "I owe you an apology," Edward said. The words came out stiff, unpracticed. "I pushed you into something you never wanted. I told myself I was teaching you discipline, building your character, but I was really just trying to make you love something that I loved. That was wrong." Bryce stared at him. In 22 years, he had never heard his father apologize for anything. "Why do you love running so much?" Bryce asked. Edward held up the photograph. "Because a runner saved my life. 20 years ago, I collapsed during this same marathon. I was dying on the side of the road, and everyone ran past me. Everyone except one man. He was about to make the national team, and he threw it all away to help a stranger." He handed the photo to Bryce. "His name was James Reed. I have been searching for him for 20 years. Edward's voice shook. "And today, his son did exactly the same thing. For you." Bryce looked at the photograph, at the young black man holding up his father, at the smile on that face. "You do not have to run anymore," Edward said. "I should have asked what you wanted years ago. I am asking now. I want to open a restaurant." Bryce laughed bitterly. "I know that sounds stupid." "It does not sound stupid. It sounds like something you actually care about." Edward put his hand on his son's shoulder. "Then open a restaurant. I will help you." Bryce looked up at his father. Something broke open in his chest. "I am sorry I cheated," Bryce whispered. "I am sorry I became someone who hurts people." "I know." Edward squeezed his shoulder. "We both have debts to pay." The hospital corridor was dark and quiet. Marcus sat beside his father's bed watching James sleep. It was almost midnight. The numbers kept running through his head. $312, $80,000, 3 months. A knock on the door made him jump. He opened it. A tall man in an expensive coat stood in the hallway. Silver hair, familiar face. "I am Edward Whitfield," the man said. "Bryce's father." Marcus tensed. "If you are here to cause trouble, I am here to repay a debt." Edward held up a photograph. 2 men at a finish line. One exhausted, one smiling arm around the other's shoulders. Marcus recognized that smile. He saw it every time he looked in the mirror. "That is my father," he whispered. 20 years ago, your father saved my life." Edward's voice cracked. He was about to make the national team. He gave it up to carry a stranger to safety. I have been searching for him ever since. He looked past Marcus to the hospital bed. And today, his son did exactly the same thing for my son. Marcus could not speak. "I am paying for the surgery," Edward said. "All of it. $80,000. The hospital will have the money by morning." He pressed an envelope into Marcus's hands. "There is also money for a new wheelchair, and a scholarship, and a spot in a professional training program. I cannot accept this. This is not charity. This is what I owe." Edward's eyes glistened. "Your father's kindness was not wasted, Marcus. It just took 20 years to find its way back. Tell him that when he wakes up." He turned and walked away. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, holding the envelope, staring at the photograph of his young father smiling at a stranger. Behind him, a weak voice spoke. Marcus James was awake, his eyes fixed on the photograph in his son's hand. "I remember him," James whispered. "I thought stopping for him ruined my life." "It did not, Dad." Marcus sat beside the bed and took his father's hand. "It saved his. And 20 years later, it saved yours." James stared at the photo. Tears spilled down his cheeks. "I spent so long being angry at myself for stopping," he said. "I thought my kindness was wasted." "It was not wasted." Marcus squeezed his hand. "It just took 20 years to come back around." James pulled his son into a hug and cried. It was the first time Marcus had ever seen his father cry. They held each other in that dark hospital room, father and son, while 20 years of bitterness finally dissolved into something that felt like grace. 1 year later, New York City Marathon, starting line. Marcus stood among the elite runners, but everything had changed. New shoes custom fitted, technical gear with sponsor logos, a GPS watch tracking his heart rate. The kid in the duct-taped shoes was gone. In his place stood a professional athlete. Ray stood beside him, clipboard in hand, stopwatch around his neck. The old man still wore his permanent scowl, still wrote training notes by hand on paper. But his jacket now had a logo, and beneath it, a name: Marcus Reed. "You remember the plan?" Ray asked. "Conservative until mile 18, then let loose. And if someone tries to box you in, run around them. I have the legs for it now." Ray nodded. Something flickered across his granite face that might have been pride. "You are ready, kid. Faster than anyone I have ever trained. Faster than your old man ever was." He paused. "Go show them what a Reed can do." Marcus touched his chest. Beneath the expensive jersey, the photograph still pressed against his heart, same place it had always been. But now the jersey itself carried words printed across the front. "Reed for Dad. Mile 24. Mile 24. Kilometer 40. The place where his father stopped 20 years ago. The place where Marcus stopped 1 year ago. The place where kindness lived. The starting cannon boomed." Marcus launched forward with the elite pack, his new shoes gripping the pavement with a precision his old taped-up flats never had. This time there was no last wave to fight through, no casual joggers blocking his path. He started exactly where he belonged at the front. The miles disappeared beneath his feet. 5, 10, 15. He held back, conserving energy, tucking in behind the leaders, while his body settled into its rhythm. Ray's voice echoed in his head, conservative, until 18, then let loose. At mile 18, he let loose. His legs found another gear, a reserve of power that a year of professional training had unlocked. He surged past the runners who had been leading their faces, registering shock as the kid in the Reed jersey blew past them like they were standing still. 20 miles, 22, 24. The crowd noise swelled as he approached kilometer 40. His heart pounded, but not from exhaustion, from anticipation. He looked to the side of the road. There they were. James sat in a brand new wheelchair, the expensive kind with proper support and smooth wheels. His surgery had been successful. 6 months of physical therapy had restored strength to his upper body. He would never walk again, but he was alive. He was healthy. He was here. Edward Whitfield stood beside him, one hand resting on the back of the wheelchair. The billionaire who had searched for 20 years to repay a debt. The stranger James had saved on this same stretch of road 2 decades ago. 2 men in their 50s, one black and one white, standing side by side like old friends, like brothers. And next to them, wearing a bright orange volunteer vest, handing out water cups to passing runners Bryce Whitfield. The vest had a logo on it, Mile 24 Foundation. Edward had started it 8 months ago, a charity dedicated to helping runners from underprivileged backgrounds. equipment grants, training scholarships, entry fees for races they could never otherwise afford, named after the moment that changed two families forever. Bryce had insisted on volunteering at the Kilometer 40 water station. He wanted to be there. He wanted to be part of the story. Marcus's eyes met his father's as he ran past. James was crying, not from sadness. His face was split into the widest smile Marcus had ever seen, tears streaming down his cheeks, his hands raised above his head in triumph. "Go, baby!" James screamed, his voice carrying over the roar of the crowd. "Run! Show them who you are!" Edward raised a fist in the air and shouted something Marcus could not hear over the noise. Bryce cheered so hard he nearly dropped his stack of water cups, laughing and crying at the same time. Marcus did not stop. This time he did not need to. The people at Kilometer 40 were not injured, not suffering, not in need of rescue. They were whole. They were happy. They were there to watch him fly. He tucked his chin and ran faster. The final miles blurred together. Screaming crowds, burning lungs, the steady rhythm of his feet devouring the pavement. He passed the spot where Bryce had fallen. He passed the place where he had made his choice. None of it could touch him now. The finish line appeared ahead. Marcus crossed it alone, 10 seconds ahead of the second-place runner. The clock read 2:14:22, 2 hours, 14 minutes, 22 seconds. Faster than his father had ever run. Faster than most humans would ever run. Fast enough to win the New York City Marathon. First place, champion! The crowd exploded, 50,000 voices screaming his name, cameras flashing from every direction, officials rushing forward with a medal, with a banner, with microphones and questions and demands for his attention. Marcus walked past all of it. Back at Kilometer 40, James sat in his wheelchair watching the giant screen that showed his son crossing the finish line. Tears would not stop falling down his face. Edward put a hand on his shoulder. 2:14:22, faster than both of us old men combined. James laughed through his tears. That is my boy. That is my son. After the chaos died down, Marcus found a quiet spot behind the grandstands. He sat on the ground away from the cameras and reporters and pulled off his new shoes. Then he reached into his bag and took out something else, his father's old shoes. Gray and battered, held together with silver duct tape, the soles worn almost through. He had carried them the entire race, tucked into a small pack on his back. He had not run in them, but he could not leave them behind. He set the two pairs side by side on the ground. New shoes and old shoes, present and past. The athlete he had become and the son he would always be. Inside his father's shoes, the words were still there, faded but legible. Not fast enough. Next year will be faster. And below them, in Marcus's handwriting, next year is now. Footsteps approached. Marcus looked up. Ray came first, his granite face cracked into an actual smile. Behind him, James wheeled forward, with Edward pushing the chair. And behind them, limping slightly but walking on his own, came Bryce. 2:14 and 22 seconds, Ray said. Fastest time of the day. Fastest American in the field. He shook his head slowly. Your old man would have been proud. Hell, he is proud. I can see it from here. James wheeled himself closer. His eyes were red from crying, but he was still smiling. My boy, James said, his voice thick with emotion. My beautiful, stubborn, incredible boy. You did it. Marcus stood and walked to his father. He knelt beside the wheelchair and wrapped his arms around James. We did it, Dad. Both of us. No. James shook his head. You did all the hard work. You ran every mile. You earned this. I would not be here without you. Everything I know about running, about life, about being a man, I learned from you. James reached up and touched his son's face. You are faster than me now. Faster than I ever was. That does not matter. It matters to me. James's voice cracked. I spent years thinking I wasted my talent, wasted my chance, but I raised a son who became a champion. That is better than any medal I could have won. Edward stepped forward and extended his hand. Congratulations, Marcus. You earned every second of that time. Marcus shook his hand. Thank you. For everything. The training, the scholarship, the surgery. I can never repay you. You do not owe me anything. Your father paid the debt 20 years ago. I was just returning what I borrowed. Bryce limped forward. He looked different than he had a year ago. The arrogance was gone from his posture. The sneer had vanished from his face. He carried himself like someone who had finally figured out who he wanted to be. I watched you cross that finish line, Bryce said. First place, champion. You actually did it. I had help. You had talent. I spent years training with the best coaches money could buy, and I never came close to what you just did." Bryce shook his head. "Some things cannot be bought." Marcus smiled. "How is the restaurant coming?" Bryce's face lit up. "We open in 3 weeks. I have been testing recipes every day. My hands smell like garlic permanently. It is the hardest work I have ever done." He grinned. "I have never been happier in my life." "I am glad. You still owe me a visit. Free meal. Remember, I am holding you to that." "I will be there. Save me a table." They stood together behind the grandstands, the champion, the coach, the father, the billionaire, and the former rival who had become something like a friend. 5 people whose lives had been woven together by choices made on a stretch of road 20 years apart. James looked at Edward. "Hell of a thing. 20 years and it all comes back around." "Kindness always comes back," Edward said. "It just moves slower than we would like, but it finds its way home eventually." "I stopped believing that for a long time." "So did I." Edward looked at Marcus, then at Bryce. "Our sons reminded us." Marcus picked up his father's old shoes and held them against his chest. The duct tape was peeling. The soles were cracked. They would never run another race. But the words inside would last forever. "Not fast enough. Next year will be faster. Next year is now." He had run the race, he had won the prize, but the victory that mattered most was not the medal around his neck or the time on the clock. It was the man in the wheelchair smiling at him with tears in his eyes. It was the knowledge that his father's sacrifice 20 years ago had not been wasted. It was the proof that kindness given freely and without expectation always finds its way back. Marcus tucked the old shoes into his bag, put his arm around his father's shoulders, and walked away from the grandstands. Behind them, the crowd was still cheering, still chanting his name. Ahead of them, the rest of their lives waited. "Dad," Marcus said as they walked. "Yeah. Next year, I am going to run even faster." James laughed, the sound bright and full, in a way Marcus had not heard since before the accident. "I know you will, but do me a favor." "What?" "If someone falls down in front of you, stop and help them." Marcus smiled. "Always." They walked together into the fading afternoon light, father and son carrying the weight of the past and the promise of the future on their shoulders. The race was over. The story was just beginning. The story of Marcus and Bryce's marathon race has ended, but its impact will surely remain in our hearts as a valuable lesson about humanity. It gently reminds us that the greatest victory sometimes doesn't lie in who crosses the finish line first, but in the moment we are brave enough to stop and help others get back on their feet. Marcus's actions have shown us that the true strength of a person is not measured by speed, money, or arrogance, but by compassion and tolerance. As his father James has believed for the past 20 years, kindness always finds its way back home. Sometimes what we give seems to vanish into thin air, but in reality, it is silently returning to protect us at the most unexpected moment. And what about you? In the hurried races of your life, have you ever accepted slowing down a step to help someone, even knowing that you might suffer a disadvantage? And if faced with the choice between personal glory and saving someone who once hurt you like Marcus, would you listen to reason or the beat of your heart? Please share your thoughts and stories of kindness in the comments below. We'd love to hear them. If this story of fatherly love and forgiveness brings you some peace of mind, don't forget to like the video, share it with your loved ones, and subscribe to the channel. Your support is what motivates us to continue spreading seeds of love. Thank you for always being here, listening, and understanding.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.